elsewhere, I'd like to know how much it would cost to build a tire for a more aggressive rider, because then you'd have a track that was more aggressive and rewarded deep braking. You'd have someone like Cal or Ben being able to challenge someone like Jorge, be able to out brake him, block past him. But that ain't going to happen until we start to get these regulations in line. I don't really know where Superbike is going to go. It was a shock to all of our systems that we kind of knew something was going to happen, but it was a shock to our systems how it was done. And Dorna at the moment needs to fix MotoGP, if anything, before they go and sort out something with Superbike. And as you all know, it's more difficult to see Superbike. I don't know where you're all from. I know there's a lot of Australians and so on. I live in Barcelona, and I have British Eurosport. I cheat. I have the satellite from England, and I can watch it. But if I have Spanish Eurosport, International Eurosport, I can't even see World Superbike. And for me, that's ridiculous. But that's the way that particular side of that championship went. The electronics. They're talking about doing a single ECU. Honda's already adamant. Dennis Noyes, who's commentary and a really, really good friend of mine, he had a meeting with, what's the head Japanese vice president of HRC, Nakamoto. He had a meeting with him today. And because regulations, Dorna wants a single ECU, I believe, by 2015. Honda says they have a contract until 16 with the regulations the way that they are, and they're not going to bend. That they are adamant to say it's open, we want open electronics, open ECU box, and so on. So the problem with all that is you have at the far end, one end, you have somebody who's building the boxes, who's writing the programs, and at the other end where people are trying to read those programs. And where I'm going to get at with all this crap is World Superbike. I can run a tire. I can have a Pirelli. I can have the same tire as Mac Biaggi. But wait a sec, I can't have the electronics he has. Where does that get you? When it comes down to all that kind of stuff, you're going to need those kind of the pieces and everything that makes these bikes go around the corners. And to me, unless there's 250 or 260 channels on some of these motorcycles with different packages of electronics. One way is to get rid of the fly-by-wire, get rid of all these things. These guys are twisting the throttles. I know the Yamahas are using 2 butterflies sometimes when they close the throttle, then only 2 shut, so it doesn't use a lot of engine brake. When they open the throttle, only 2 are opening. These are the tricks of the trade of what they're using. And sometimes the factory bikes have it way before satellite teams. Is that fair? When I've got to run his tire, but he doesn't have to run my RPM, or he doesn't have to run my electronics. Again, I don't want to talk things down like it sounds like it is, because that's what it really is. The last thing I'll talk about is Valentino. When you were, well, I'll talk about Casey as well, but Valentino, the Ducati, where all that is. You all know, walk into a Japanese motorcycle shop and look at the bikes. Very, very similar, just like a camera shop. The way that the chassis are made, the way they're formed. Obviously, HRC welds are a bit better here and there, maybe compared to Suzuki and so on and so forth. Not trying to talk any brands out, but there are different breeds out in there. But in general, you look at that. If I took you in to the garages with no engines in any of the chassis, you probably wouldn't be able to identify, without having a lot of experience in looking at pictures, identify the difference between the Yamaha and the Honda and so on and so forth. Maybe some of you has expertise or someone, but I'm talking without fuel tanks, without wheels in it, and so on. But if I took you to the Ducati garage, you'd go, that's Ducati. And if you look at the Ducati chassis right now, for me, it looks like a 125 chassis. And that's got to compete on the same tire and try to turn like a Honda does or like a Yamaha does. And that's because of the way the regulations are and the way things are set. Honda's been making chassis for more than 30 years. You heard at the beginning of the year, Casey and Danny, the Honda guys were complaining a lot of chatter. The last race I know that they complained about chatter, but I know even Yamaha complained about chatter. But those chassis kind of went away. I think they've gone through 5 or 6 chassis. Ducati's only on their 3rd aluminum chassis in their life. And how do you compete against something like HRC? So, these are things that have to be backed out and have to be fixed. You have to say that Valentino and Vicky have both been more consistent in the last few races. But when you've got a different type of engine layout and so on, compared to what the Japanese have, and what the Japanese, I guess, reach in on their years of experience. Casey Stoner. It's really going to be sad to see this kid go. He's been around for forever, it seems like, and that's because he made the sacrifice with his dad, like we all did. His mom and dad. And obviously, you guys that live down here, especially in Australia, you guys live a long ways from everything. Mm-hmm. Not to say that it's bad, but man, if you want to be a racer, it's a long ways to go. So, by packing up the family and leaving, they left a lot behind, and it's taken its toll for Casey. He's got a daughter now, and probably going to look for having a couple more kids, I would imagine. But he is absolutely one of the most talented riders that the world has seen, and we know that, and it's going to be a shame for him to go. I personally hope he can win at Phillip Island. I don't know if he'll be able to do that. We'll have to wait and see. I know physically he was wore out after the Japanese race, and by sitting around, this sounds bad, sitting around and not being able to work your heart and do those type of exercises, cardiovascular exercises, when other guys are doing that week in and week out. Cal is an animal. Cal's on the bicycle 2, 3, 4 hours sometimes a day. He rides with Cavendish, the guys that are doing Tour de France stuff and things like that. And most of these guys are doing that kind of stuff. But it's going to be a shame to see him go. Obviously, we've got things to look forward to next year. Valentino moving, Marquez moving up. Bradley Smith's going to move up. There's a few riders that are moving up. Things that are going to change around here and there. Whether or not the regulations will go, I'm not sure. Anybody want to ask a question?
Yeah, I have to say, absolutely fascinating, a lot of things. I imagine there's about 600,000 questions. Let me catch one over here first.
Firstly, it's an honour to have you tonight, Randy. You were the first a purple crop. First of a purple crop of American riders. It was Mamola, Randy, Kalinsky, once. It was just...
Both Roberts, Eddie.
Well, that's two questions I have for you. The first is really, you were among that purple crop of riders back in the 80s and 90s. So what happened between then, and which was the best American rider besides you that came through that time?
And it is really funny, as most people don't know, I'm the third most podium finisher out of all the U.S. riders that have been world champions. I've never been one, but they've never been me on those aspects. Of course, I'd like to trade off one of my silver medals for a gold one, but I've got 4 silver, a couple bronze, and I'm happy for what I did. Kenny Roberts, thank you. But Kenny Roberts for me, I started racing in 1972. By 1974, I started on a 125 Hodaka. I don't even know if you know what a Hodaka 100 was. But I started dirt tracking like Casey, like most Americans did. And that generation that came over and did a lot of domination of winning all came from two-stroke racing, like Casey. The two-stroke, again, dirt tracking on a two-stroke, riding motocross, and everything about that was very, very tough. And when you go and ride a 450F or 250F or something like that motocross, it just does everything for you now. You still got to jump the thing and so on and so forth, but it was much easier. So I think the talent in that aspect was completely different. And then Superbikes came in, obviously in the States and so on, but I was already in Europe. But Kenny Roberts, to me, still is my number one. And the reason why I say that is because we used to have the Grand National. The Grand National, you had to do short track, TT, which was, it could be a quarter mile with a jump in the middle. There's a track called Ascot, Houston Astrodome, and so on and so forth. And then you had road racing. You had to do all the disciplines in order to be the Grand National Champion. And Kenny did that. And out of all the people that I know, Nick Doohan, that I think was a great champion, Wayne Rainey and all them, all the background when it comes down to it, even Valentino, all those championships, Did you guys see that video of Kenny riding a TC750 at basically 60 years old? I mean, it's just something so hairball, but that's just Kenny. I mean, he just had that really natural ability and natural talent. Well, in 1974, I signed a contract with Yamaha, so I had a 2-year deal with Yamaha USA. Youngest factory rider, and I was supposed to be the prototype. So I still have those black and yellow leathers. Number 80, Kenny was 80Y, I was 80U because we come from two different districts. But for me, Kenny was that kind of magic. I was talking about this to Dennis Noyes about Freddie Spencer because I remember when Freddie won the World Championship, the double World Championship, 250 and 500. I also, in 1979, had to race twice. I rode 250. At the beginning of the season, I rode 250, 350, and then I went 250, 500. And we just did it. We went out there and rode both classes. Sometimes they were back-to-back and so on. When Freddie kind of just excelled, did all this stuff, and then just went away, got burnt out, had some personal problems and so on, it almost looked like the same thing that happened to Casey. He achieved exactly what he wanted to do. He's won a couple World Championship titles. The things that's going on with World GP and MotoGP itself, I think he wants to settle down and so on and so forth. But those are the kind of the comparisons. Everybody who's been a world champion, everybody who's been standing on the top step of the podium is sure hell in hell riding motorcycles. So